This is The Conversation Weekly from The Conversation. Every year, 400 million tonnes of plastic are produced worldwide, and every year approximately 57 million tonnes of plastic waste is created. In November last year, negotiators from around the world sat down at a UN meeting to work out a legally binding treaty that would reduce plastic pollution.
This opportunity to address the life cycle of plastics is being characterized as once in a generation.
But the negotiations at that meeting fell apart.
Negotiators have failed to reach consensus on the first ever global treaty on plastic pollution. They agreed to postpone a draft agreement amid divisions over several proposals, including the reduction of plastic production.
Oil-producing countries, including Saudi Arabia, Iran, Kuwait, and Russia, refused to sign up to a clause calling for the world to reduce its production of plastics. As clean energy technologies like electric vehicles gain traction worldwide, these economies are counting on continued and even increased plastic production to buffer them from the economic blow of reduced demand for oil. This week, the UN committee is meeting again, this time in Geneva, in hopes of coming to an agreement that can put the brakes on plastic pollution. As The Conversation Weekly takes a few weeks off in August, we thought it would be a good time to revisit this episode, which we originally ran in January 2025, on the history of plastic and how we got to this point.
We have actually stumbled in the last few decades into a system where those products that we rely on for the economy to be sold every day are pollutant, and they're polluting things very badly indeed.
This is Mark Miodownik. He's a professor of materials and society at University College London in the UK and the lead researcher at an innovation hub focused on reducing plastic waste.
One of the things you realise about plastic waste is it's kind of what's called a wicked problem in research terms. So it's not going to be solved by one technical innovation. It's much more complicated than that. It's all about how people use it, how companies use it, how they carry it around and want to interact with it.
In today's episode, Mark walks us through the history of plastic and how it's shaped our lives over the last few centuries. So much so that we now find ourselves facing the dilemma of an economic system where nearly every product we use is also a major pollutant. He also offers some practical ideas for how we can begin moving the needle on this enormous plastic pollution problem. I'm Gemma Ware, and this is The Conversation Weekly, the world explained by experts. Then I'll set. All right, so we've come downstairs to the Institute of Making. Tell me about this place before we get into the history. I met Mark at the Institute of Making at UCL, which is actually just a few streets away from the Conversation's offices in London. It's a dedicated materials library and maker space where anyone at the university can come, find out about materials, and get to play with some really cool machines such as 3D printers and lathes. The entranceway is lined with tall glass cabinets, neatly filled with samples of more than 450 different materials.
We have this collection of materials, this materials library, which we're standing in front, which is like the most wonderful collection of stuff.
It really is.
Yeah, it's from bricks to nanoparticles. In fact, we've got a sample of every single one of the elements of the periodic table here in a box, which is one of my favourite things.
The collection tells the story of modern human civilization through the materials that we used. But today I've come to talk to Mark about a single, albeit major facet of that story, plastic. So where do we need to begin to tell the history of plastic?
The history of plastic starts with the natural plastics. I mean, plastics are long-chain carbon molecules. So these are millions of atoms long, and that you can think of them as sort of a spaghetti at the molecular level. And because the spaghetti can move around and slide past each other, that's why plastics are plastic. They can move and mould. So that's what's the key thing about them.
The first plastics we humans used were natural ones, such as rubber from tree sap.
Many cultures used that for thousands of years, but then humanity really started using it on an industrial scale when electricity was invented. And the thing about electricity and having cables of it is that you need to insulate it from everything else. And everyone was like looking around and said, whoa, we can just use the rubber out of the trees.
But as time went on, people began to realise that this tree resin wasn't ideal for the job. So scientists began working to develop synthetic formulations better suited to their purposes.
Inventors in America, the Hyatt brothers, what they end up with is this thing called celluloid. Now, celluloid is touted as a much better alternative to natural materials. So it's going to replace things like horn, which we've got here. And the horn and things like that were used increasingly for things like glass frames, so horn rim glasses. So these are horns of quite, we would say, endangered animals now. So ivory, huge amounts of ivory coming across for billiard balls and piano keys. And the idea was, okay, let's make a synthetic version of it. That costs a lot of money. It's wrecking the environment. It's killing all these animals. Can't we do better? And so celluloid is this synthetic version. But then we find its absolute brilliance, which is that it can be made into a thin film. I've got some of it here.
So you've got a small jar with an old bit of film.
Yeah.
Before celluloid, photographs were made using large glass plates embedded with silver nitrides that reacted with light to create the image. But this meant taking a camera out of a portrait studio was really difficult. The equipment was heavy and easily broken.
Early on, a guy called Eastman says, look, we can actually make celluloid into this thin film, and instead of having glass plates, we can have plastic plates. And also, we can make the camera portable because we can roll this stuff up because it's flexible plastic, and we'll have a roll of film. It's this big discovery that photography can be part of everyone's life and record everyday scenes instead of just being this thing that people go to have a portrait done. And of course, once you've rolled up plastic into a roll and you take several photos in a row, someone notices quite quickly, well, if you run them past a projector, the images appear to move. And you get the invention of cinema, which is the biggest invention, biggest new way of telling stories for thousands of years. And movies are born, and they are called celluloid.
And that then opened up another whole avenue of research, did it?
Well, once people really start thinking, oh, look, okay, we can make synthetic plastics, and they can do this. What else can they do? And so the next steps are, well, there's sound recording, so you get vinyl being produced, and this is what we call today PVC. It's the material that all your gas and water arrive at your house, and you get development of a thermoset by a guy called Leo Baekeland, and he makes this material called Bakelite, which is a hard plastic, and it's meant to replace kind of wooden items. So whereas the thermoplastics replace the kind of flexible stuff, he makes one, and you can see a sample here. So this is a Bakelite telephone. And
it's an old school one with the dial where you put your finger on it.
Yeah, and it's original. And the reason why this goes so big is partly that you can start mass producing items in a particular shape, and they're all the same. And so modernism, this idea of the fact that things don't have to be individually carved, that you can all have these multiples. People like the idea of it, even though it sounds a bit weird because it's no longer about you and what you need. It's about what everyone needs. So this is early 20th century. We're into sort of 1920s, 1930s. The telephone becomes big, and everyone's getting a telephone, and they're made of Bakelite. And then the radio comes along, another electric revolution, and they are made of Bakelite. And then the television comes along, and they're made of Bakelite. So this plastic Bakelite starts to represent modernity. It's a huge revolution in the way people think about themselves, how they communicate with the world, who they are. Like, what humans are now is totally different. You can instantly communicate all the way around the world. You can talk to people. You can hear music from another continent. How do we get our heads around that? Let's just embrace plastic and all its wonderfulness and call that modernity. So plastic becomes this material of this new era, and everyone goes to town with it.
In the 1940s, fast food arrives, and with it the need for disposable packaging. This is one of the first instances of single-use plastic.
Because plastic now is big business, the price comes down. It's actually quite a luxurious and expensive material before this, but then the price comes way down, so you can start to give it away with your food, right? So you can start to have a fast food meal in which all of the wrappings and the cup are made of plastic, and you're expected, and the adverts show it, to throw it into the environment. And the idea is that's ultimate liberation, ultimate freedom. This material starts to really kind of double down on humans have been liberated. They can talk to anyone, they can hear anyone, they can see anyone, and now they can just throw things everywhere because it's so cheap they don't have to worry about it.
From there, it's a short leap to the polyethylene grocery bag and the food packaging at grocery stores.
So you have these packages for around your goods, and people start to really get into the idea that food is not really hygienic unless it's surrounded by plastic. And we have really got to that point now where even people will not buy an apple now unless it's in a plastic bag because of that hermetic seal, the idea that this will not have been touched by anyone except for the person who picked it. And even then, they'll probably have plastic gloves these days. And so you can really feel comforted that this apple is pure.
And you've got behind us some plastic gloves, as you say. So it's not just about kind of items, it's about clothing, it's about fashion and things like that as well, right?
Yeah. And what I like about plastic is that it's a moldable material, right? But it has molded itself to our desires for life. And so if you want to not get your hands dirty and you want to be, protected from the environment, you make some plastic gloves, and it's perfectly suited to that. But if you want to, let's say, fly in an aeroplane and you need a really lightweight material, which is going to be easy to get up into the air, you make that out of plastic too. So it was called the material of a million uses, and that really is true today.
It's easy to hear Mark's enthusiasm for plastic and the story it tells about who we are as humans. Materials and how they're made have always fascinated him. And when I sat down with him up in his office, he told me that for many years he'd go to primary schools giving talks about how materials like plastic are made.
I'm giving one of these talks and doing lots of fun demos. And at the end of it, I ask for questions and the kids say, "What are you doing about the plastic waste problem?" And I go, "Oh, well, I don't really work in plastic waste. Someone else, that's the way academia works. Like, people have very specialisms and, don't worry, people are working on it." But anyway, they looked completely deflated by that. And then I was like, yeah. And so then later on I thought, whoa, why don't I work in plastic waste? Like, it is like the major problem in the materials world. Why don't I do it? So that was 2018. I was like, I really need to start doing some research into plastic waste. And I realized that I had this blind spot, that I was being so excited about making materials and new materials that I had never really thought too deeply about what happens at the end of life. Like, where do they go? And of course, in the case of plastics, you can see where they go. They go in the oceans because that's downhill from everywhere. And so they all end up there, don't they? And you can only see the ones that float, but there's a lot more that don't float or are at the bottom of the ocean, by the way. So then at some point, I think my consciousness kind of was like, we really need to do something about this. So yeah, we do lots of research now in my research group on plastic waste.
Mark's research group is called the Plastic Waste Innovation Hub, a multidisciplinary team of scientists, engineers, designers, and social scientists dedicated to finding ways to reduce and eliminate plastic waste.
To give you an example of the kind of projects we look at, we're looking now at the plastic waste associated with nappies and period products and incontinence products for the elderly. These are all what are called absorbent hygiene products. They're almost 50% plastic. They're fantastic products. They really deliver. Like, any parent knows how good a single-use plastic nappy is.
Absolutely.
They really, really work. But they're working because they have so much plastic in them. At end of life, what happens to them? Well, 99% of them get burnt or end up in the environment. And we map the system out. And I think one of the things you realize when you just look at a product category like nappies, for instance, or diapers, you realize that it's a global supply chain. It's incredibly efficient, that supply chain, and that's why the price is at its price point, which is amazing value for money. And any solution to it that doesn't create as much waste as the current one has to be cheaper. The majority of people will only buy if it's both better for the environment and cheaper. And so that's a really massive challenge for us.
And of course, it's not just nappies. Plastic is in our clothes, our shoes, our household goods, our food packaging. Name an object you use every day, and if it didn't actually grow out of the earth, it's probably got some form of plastic in it. Was there a moment when plastic manufacturers started to realise that plastic was just not going to decay in the landfill? And what happened then?
Yeah, you can see in the records of these companies that are starting to make it large quantities of it that they know about this, and different scientists in the companies flag it up. And also not just them, but the government knows about this. And so people who are dealing with the waste start to flag it up. No one ever really takes it seriously. This is the 1970s. So this is at the point where things are being sold in plastic and those ended up in the environment and people could see it happening, but no one was that bothered. But I have to say, and I'm not excusing anyone, people weren't very environmentally sensitive about lots of things. So for instance, most of the waste was going to landfill anyway. And this is people's furniture, this is people's everything. And we had a kind of acceptance that you just put stuff in a hole in the ground. That was fine. And it didn't dawn on anyone, I think, that although maybe wood and fabric would decay over time in those holes in the ground, and so perhaps it wasn't disastrous, that the plastic bits, which were becoming a greater and greater fraction of everything that was becoming waste, wouldn't decay anytime soon, like in decades. So it's confusing, but also you can see that the companies obviously don't want to deal with it. It's going to cost them money. And us people who are buying this stuff, we went along with it, right? We luxuriated in it. We weren't too bothered either.
Mark says that after environmental activists raised the alarm in the 1980s and 90s, governments and companies slowly started to at least pay lip service to plastic recycling. These days, there's been a shift in our attitudes towards plastic as people are starting to realise the scale of the plastic pollution problem. Landfills are filling up and microplastics are turning up in nearly every body of water around the world. How bad is the pollution problem from plastics right now?
I mean, it's a catastrophe. It's off the scale bad. Like, the amounts are huge. 400 million tons of plastic. It's so shocking.
Yeah.
But we don't want to see it.
Kathleen Folbig was known as Australia's worst female serial killer. She was convicted of killing her 4 infant children until a scientist uncovered the truth.
Scientists want to know the truth and want to get to the bottom of things, particularly in a case like this where science can solve it.
The Lab Detective is the story of a shocking miscarriage of justice and an investigation into why Kathleen's story might not be the last. Listen wherever you get your podcasts.
About 430 million tonnes of plastic are produced each year, and a study in 2017 found that since the 1960s, around 400 million tonnes of plastic waste have been produced. Few plastic manufacturers have faced consequences for their inaction, though these days there seems to be a bit more of a collective will to take action against them. In 2024, the US federal government successfully sued Keurig, the company that makes those little plastic pods that produce 1 cup of coffee or tea, for claiming that those pods are recyclable.
Keurig, in its annual reports, had claimed that K-Cups could effectively be recycled. But government officials say the company failed to disclose that 2 of the largest U.S. recyclers told Keurig that they did not intend to accept the disposable coffee pods. Keurig has agreed to pay the civil penalty without admitting or denying the government findings.
Keurig paid just $1.5 million in penalties, and it remains a staple in most offices and many homes in the US. The US state of California has brought a similar lawsuit against ExxonMobil, alleging that it knowingly made fraudulent claims about the recyclability of its plastic products.
According to a lawsuit filed Monday, Exxon promoted recycling as a solution for consumers worried about buying more plastic products, while knowing that only about 5% of plastics actually get recycled.
Mark doesn't lay the blame solely at the feet of companies like these.
They're a reflection of what we've demanded. We want to live in a wealthy way. We want to have trainers. We want to have cheap clothes. And we signal that by buying them. And we're in a consumer society, and the whole of the economy relies on everyone buying stuff. You stop buying stuff, people lose their jobs. Then they won't be able to make something. Then they're on benefits and you're paying for it. So then your taxes go up and then you lose your job because your company doesn't make any money. People are absolutely terrified that the consumerist paradigm will die if they come down too heavily on plastic waste and all other waste.
Ultimately, regardless of how we got here, the problem of plastic pollution still needs to be solved. After decades of messaging from environmental groups and governments on the importance of recycling, you can't fault the average person for thinking that recycling is the answer. But Mark explains that while plastic recycling does help, it's not a simple or definitive solution to plastic pollution. This is in part due to economics.
Recycling of plastic is actually really expensive compared to making new plastic. So recycled plastic can't really compete in the marketplace to make a plastic bottle, for instance. It still can't. And the reason for that is that the plastic industry is a $1 trillion industry. And because it's a $1 trillion industry, it has incredible efficiencies of scale. But it has meant that there's no incentive, there's no financial money to be made in recycling because you've got to compete against a $1 trillion industry, and most recycling operations are, a few million at best. So it was always this asymmetry, and it still is today. And in fact, when the oil price goes down, loads of recycling places go out of business. It's happened in my lifetime, several cycles. The oil price goes down, plastics get even cheaper, recycling plastics become less competitive, and they get priced out of the market.
Only 3 plastics really have a big enough market to sustain a profitable recycling economy. Polypropylene, a rigid plastic found in food packaging, polyethylene, which is what plastic bags are made of, and PET, which is what plastic bottles are made out of. These three are staples in the single-use plastic packaging industry. But even recycling these three types of plastic isn't straightforward due to the nature of plastic itself.
It's these long-chain carbon molecules, and in the case of polyethylene, which is like plastic bag plastic, these are little ethylene molecules all linked together. And if you put in other plastics into that and try and make another plastic bag out of it, it'll fall apart. So when you make a plastic bag out of recycled polyethylene, you have to really be careful that it's 99% polyethylene. You can't have mixtures. Mixtures kill plastics. And one of the big problems of plastic recycling is that products come into our lives and they're often a mixture of plastics. So your clothes, for instance, are a mixture of plastics. Your shoes, if you wear trainers, they're a mixture of plastics. And the mixture makes that object unrecyclable. Like there's no economic way of separating them out that we actually have now. So there's only one place that they're going to go, and that is either two places, landfill or incineration, or just into the environment.
Okay, but for the most part, you might throw something that's got two bits of plastic connected together. Perhaps you've been a bit lazy and haven't separated them out. That's just never going to get recycled.
No, it's never going to get recycled.
And there's another problem with recycling plastic, one that Mark believes plastic producing companies are directly responsible for.
What's particularly appalling to me is to find that you have companies marketing products into countries like, drinks which are made from PET, saying this is recyclable. Okay, so we're fine. We've done our job now. It's fully recyclable. But that country has no recycling infrastructure. So it makes absolutely no difference it's recyclable because it's going to end up in the environment and kill biodiversity and pollute people's everything. So for me, that's unforgivable. And I think any executives who are doing that, marketing that stuff, need to desist. But it's not against the law. And I think we need to change the laws so that if you make something, you're responsible for its end of life. You should not be able to sell any product into a market where there's not a waste processing system in place which can deal with that material. If they can't deal with that material and not make it polluting, you shouldn't be allowed to sell it. It's, to me, very clear.
This is the polluter pays.
It is polluter pays, but almost all our products, our electronics, our headphones, our shoes, with none of that would pass. So there's this frozen kind of horror in the system, which is that we really need to redesign everything, and we need to redesign all the waste systems, and we need to put money into it. But hey, hold on a minute, we've got to keep the economy going while we're doing that. And the economy is completely based on people buying stuff that is unrecyclable and is polluting the world.
The polluter pays approach is slowly being adopted in Western markets like the UK and the EU. But there's little movement towards this requirement happening on an international scale. When I spoke to Mark, it was just after the talks in November 2024 to try and reach a global treaty on plastic pollution had fallen apart. I asked him how he felt about that failure.
Well, I feel very sad. I think the executives who are actively derailing those talks care more about profits than polluting the world. And I would ask them to look, what kind of world do you want your children to inherit? But those kind of moral arguments don't really hold much sway. The only thing those companies care about, and the only thing they're legally mandated to care about, is profits. I really admire all the people, and I help as much as I can as well in those debates and talks. But the truth is that until you tackle consumerism as the main engine of economic growth, that will always be the problem. It's like trying to deal with a flood in your house without turning the tap off. Like, we're flooding the world with plastic, marketing it into countries with no waste infrastructure. So it's going to go into the environment.
So you've just set out this, what you think is kind of a way forward, where somebody who's producing a product has to make sure that it's recyclable, or at least it can be reused in some way. But we're at this paralysis point where most products then wouldn't be sold. So what can we then do more immediately about plastics now? They're everywhere. What's the best way to stop this plastic pollution problem?
So the best way to stop it is, on the one hand, we need to put a lot of money into plastic recycling technology so that we can start having that in place for the products people love, like a pair of headphones, right? It's pretty much a kind of staple of many, many people. Totally unrecyclable. So, in 10 years' time, would I be able to buy a pair of headphones and know that at end of life it's completely recycled? Yes, please. That's where we need to be. So we need to really up the investment into recycling technology. So at the moment, people are piling money into AI, but that isn't going to solve any pollution problem, right? Because no AI is going to solve plastic recycling because it's a physical process. It might help. It will help. I'm sure it will help. But if you're getting trillions of dollars going to AI and almost no money going into recycling technologies, that's a bad thing. So we've got to reverse that. And the government's probably the only way that's going to happen, right? That's going to take 10, 20 years minimum, I'm afraid. Sorry.
As well as investing in better waste management technology, Mark believes we need to build up our repair and reuse economy.
So what do I do as a person who wants to buy a pair of headphones and not feel like I'm making the world worse? Answer, in my view, is you should buy repairable headphones, modular headphones. They're on the market. There are companies who are selling headphones that are designed to live for the whole of your life. You will not have to ever put them in the bin. Of course, the spare parts that go wrong in the next 20 years of those headphones you buy will create some waste, but far less waste. And you'll nurture them and you'll repair them and you'll keep it going, and your impact on the world will be 10% of the current paradigm, which is you buy a pair of cheap headphones and they die within 2 years, and you buy another pair of cheap headphones and they die within 2 years. And that's how the consumerist model works. So we need, in the short term, while recycling is being upscaled to all those products, because I sort of do believe in the end that you're going to have to find a way to recycle everything, you need to get reuse and repair economy going big time in these areas that people care about. And in the areas that are just nice to have, like plastic packaging on food, that just shop in a market if you can, right? Go to a real market if you can, and do not buy your apples wrapped in plastic. They do not need to be wrapped in plastic. It's just going to pollute the world. You don't need to buy oranges in plastic or bananas. Like, you can do your bit, because the supermarkets, the only reason they wrap your fruit in plastic is because they think you want it.
So just to end then, we are all part of this consumer society, which, as you say, you believe needs to change. But there is a psychological aspect to it, isn't it? The feeling that when you rinse out your jar of mayonnaise or something, putting it in your recycling bin, that you are trying to do your part in some way. I guess, how do you reconcile, oh, my part is actually very tiny and, it's not really helping? And even if all of this plastic's being recycled, am I actually making a dent in this problem? How do we as people in this world kind of go about that? Is there any point to doing it? Or, what can we do about it?
I mean, I think it's the whole point, if you ask me, because the thing is, these companies that are doing this and delivering these products to you are doing it because you want it. This is the collective will. We actually live in an amazing situation where you want something, you want a product to come into life, it will come into life. I mean, it's kind of a miracle we're living through in terms of material wealth. I want a comfier trainer. Boom, it appears. I want a cooler trainer. Boom, it appears. So we need to want a sustainable trainer, right? We need collectively to want that. And we need to want that more than we want the different colors or the different bubbles, whatever, we're currently communicating to the market. So our market signals are really important. And a market signal that they take notice of, and the government take notice of, is the amount of recycling collected. As that goes up, you're saying to people, it's a vote. Every piece of plastic you put in that bag is a vote for a more sustainable world. And if you don't want to vote, you're not going to get it.
Thank you so much, Mark. It's been a pleasure talking to you.
And you, thank you very much.
That's it for this week's episode. It was written and produced by Katie Flood, with production assistance from Mend Marawani and sound design for the original episode by Michelle Macklem, and mixing for this rerun by Eloise Stevens. Our theme music is by Nita Sal, and I'm Gemma Ware, the executive producer. If you'd like to get in touch with the show, you can email us at podcast@theconversation.com. We'd love to hear from you. You can also sign up for The Conversation's free daily newsletter by clicking on the link in our show notes. The Conversation is a non-profit news outlet dedicated to sharing the work of academic experts with a wider audience. If you like what we do, please support us at donate.theconversation.com, and please rate and review the podcast wherever you follow us. Thanks for listening.